I'd like an answer to the question, Judge. You can't handle the truth!
I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti.
Rubs the lotion on its skin or else it gets the hose again.
Welcome to After Hours AM, The Criminal Code, with your hosts, Joel Sturgis, Eric Olsen, and Dr. Clarissa Cole.
And good evening, everybody, and welcome to this edition of After Hours AM, The Criminal Code. And as always, I'm your host, Joel Sturgis, and right along with me,
Eric Olsen and
Dr. Clarissa Cole.
Better known as the Three Amigos of True Crime. And I assure you, Eric is not in a tin can somewhere being held down. He is actually on the road via cell phone, so we do appreciate Eric taking the time in his hectic schedule to join us tonight, being stuck in Philadelphia traffic. So, hey, man, thanks for joining us. I realize that being in traffic is not the easiest thing in the world, and plus having to do a radio show.
Well, I'm giving it my all. We were leaving, we thought, in time to get back to home, to the studio, so that I could do the show on a normal basis, a normal equipment basis. But coming out of Philadelphia, we had a huge thunderstorm. There was outrageous snarls of traffic as a result, and it took us 2 hours just to get out of the Philadelphia area. So now I'm actually on the western side of the state. We are a little bit north of Pittsburgh and heading home toward the Cleveland area, and we may arrive before the show is over. But that's what's going on. I'm on the Pennsylvania Turnpike, for those who know it. And when we hit that border, I'll be shelling out, I don't know, $400 or $500, and it's not that much, but it's a lot in turnpike fees. I hope I have enough cash. Otherwise, maybe I'll have to leave my children.
You could sell one of them. That's all.
It's like, here don't they accept children?
Yeah, they complain.
I think they do.
Well, they do, and in some countries they are viewed as currency. So,
well, I think there was a lawsuit, and they said, look, I should be able to leave my child here and to cover the fees, and it only seems fair. And, the state of Louisiana backed it, and that was that.
Oh, how I long for the days of sweatshops. You could always just drop them off the sweatshop.
Children out of the house working at 11 years old. What is
knitting socks?
Brats these days just laying on their backs, eating bonbons till they're 27.
Well, that is true, and that does seem to be the way of the world today. But tonight, we got a tough subject to tackle, and this is something that has touched everybody at some point. Both of these items, both of these things, one of them being depression and the other one being suicide. Getting ready for the show, I talked to a lot of folks about both. And they seem to really go hand in hand at some point, in that whole, basically, it's kind of weird because I ran the gamut of people crying for help, using suicide attempt as a cry for help. Then I also ran the gamut of, the guy never said nothing to us, and next thing you know, we find him dead. So really, it just seems that depression, though, has been an epidemic now, and not only recently. I mean, it's been an epidemic forever. Myself, I've suffered from depression. I know, Clarissa, you yourself have, and Eric, you definitely have as well. And a lot of people, they bounce back from it, thank God, but some of us don't, and in the recent years, we've lost Robin Williams, we've lost Chris Cornell, and now, of course, Chester Bennington to this disease of depression. And so tonight we're going to talk to Doreen Marshall, Ph.D., and she will shed some light on this, and that is what she's been doing for the last 10 years. She's been working with local and national suicide prevention networks. and maybe she can shed some light on this very hard subject matter. And I know you, Clarissa, you've been part of the anti-suicide prevention programs in the prison for many years. And I know you know vastly more than we do about this affliction. And so that will be, of course, at the top of next hour.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about it, as morbid as that might sound, because I think that there is such a taboo, really, about talking about depression or suicide specifically, or suicidal thoughts, or things like that openly in America. I mean, we can talk about almost anything else, but you bring up the idea of suicide, and everyone really bucks against that in favor of other theories of death when it's famous people. I see that all the time when it's famous people that know someone murdered him or her. But I see that with families of the victims, whether they're famous or not, that it can't be suicide. He couldn't have done this.
Yeah.
And in fact, and I'm sure that in the next hour we'll get into it, there are usually many sort of warning signs and flags that go up before this happens. And being aware of them is a big part of preventing it.
Yeah, so true. And prevention, but prevention starts with understanding. And I think you touched on that. Here in America, we don't necessarily, it's the gorilla in the room. We don't want to talk about it.
We don't have a good understanding. We think we do. That's the thing that's really kind of upsetting to me, is that there are so many enduring myths about suicide that are so strong that people just latch onto. Like, if somebody's really going to do it, they're not going to talk about it. That being the biggest myth.
Yeah.
About suicide. Drives me crazy, but I've heard a million people say it. Educated people, smart people. We need to break down some of those myths and get to what it's really all about so that we can help prevent it. And prevention efforts are actually very successful when everyone is on the same page.
Boy, I have seen this now really in both directions as far as generations go. We've been talking about it now, for the last month plus, that my father died, and my mother has, on the surface, seemed to be handling it extremely well. In fact, so well that I've been kind of concerned because, it can't be something that is that easy on her. This is someone who she's been married to for 63 years, and the fact that she wasn't showing a whole lot of emotion about it. I mean, of course she did at the time. She did at the service, and when people talk to her about it, I mean, she doesn't clam up. I mean, she certainly shows that she has feelings, but a lot of the time she just kind of seems to be drifting along. Well, I guess since we've been gone, we left Saturday, and my wife's been having to kind of help out, and she's in assisted living, so there's plenty of other people helping too, but nonetheless, just I guess kind of since I've been gone, she was starting to really exhibit some odd behaviors, and she has now been diagnosed with mild depression, and they're starting her on some medication. This is just going on in the last day or two. And then in the other direction, my daughter, I think we talked about this at least to a certain extent, had an episode as well. And what I wanted to add as far as myths and all that is, you really do, as a parent, just have to bug them and stay on top of it and ask questions and be irritating and keep telling them how you feel about them. And it just doesn't matter how annoying it may be. You have to be there. And I've learned that. And I can tend to kind of shy away from such things, but I've seen it happen. I've seen it work. I've seen what a difference it has made. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pay the toll. So I'm putting down the phone for a moment. And that was not a metaphor. It's literal.
Yeah. You go ahead and pay that toll. Help their local economy, man. Do that. But getting back to what you're saying it is sometimes, Clarissa, the silent epidemic.
It is, and something that I did not address in my post. I had written a post about Bennington and Cornell on my blog, my website, thecriminalcode.com. What I didn't address on there is something that Eric just reminded me of, is that a lot of people actually commit suicide when they are on the upswing.
I shudder to think.
And so that's
why is that? I wonder why that is on the upswing.
Well, you're there, Eric. There, they have. Should we wait for Eric and his toll paying?
Well, maybe he's talking to the toll booth attendant, and maybe he's got some important things to say to her that we can listen in on. Here we go. Nope. Okay. Anyhow, let's move on then.
So yeah, there are hypotheses about that sometimes when people are very gravely depressed in the depths of it, they hypothesize that they don't actually have enough energy or motivation to commit suicide. But when they are on the upswing and they start to get a little bit more energy again, but they're not yet happy, they're just in the upswing away from the bottom of the barrel, so to speak, that they do have enough energy to complete the act.
Well, a quick programming note. I just got word from, we've had him on the show a few times, Eric and I. Jim Mars, Eric, has passed away, by the way. Eric? Okay, Jim Mars passed away.
I'm back. I'd be back. You know what? He really was 39. No.
Wow. Well, I was just breaking some news here that Jim Mars just passed away. Eric.
Our friend Jim Mars?
Our friend Jim Mars. We've had them both on the show. And really a wealth of knowledge. He passed away last night, by all accounts peacefully. So we wish condolences to the Mars family. And we hope that he is resting peacefully now in the hands of God, as they say. But, that's really too bad.
This is the JFK guy.
Yep. He was our good friend that really knew a lot about the JFK assassination. I hate to bust in like that, Clarissa, because we were talking and I was just handed that note via digital note, via Facebook, so I could announce that to everybody that Jim Mars indeed has passed away late last night. So, in his home in Texas, so really, again, condolences offered. Now, we were talking about people committing suicide on the upswing. That is such a weird idea.
I wanted to say that so that Eric could hear it too real quick. Eric, actually, people are more in danger of committing suicide when they're on the upswing out of depression than when they're in the depths of it.
Wow. Well, that is
in a lot of cases
worrisome, and something, all the more reason you got to really, really stay connected.
Sure.
Yes, exactly, because people will say, oh, he was feeling better, or she looked so much better when I last saw her, like she was smiling this time, and, so they think, oh, they can kind of leave them alone now because they look like they're doing better, but the hypothesis is that when they're on the upswing, there is more energy to actually complete the act that they were contemplating when they were further down.
Well, that is very, very that's very, very, very sad, and we'll get into that, of course, with you and Dr. Doreen, and we will definitely tackle all that. But, I was just thinking, we got some headlines to tackle, man. We got to do some headlines, and, of course, these headlines, as always, are brought to you by thecriminalcode.com. That's your one-stop shop for everything from mental health-related articles to true crime. Check it out. You're going to love it. Again, that's thecriminalcode.com.
All right. Well, I wanted to start off with a headline in your state, Joel.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Well, Minnesota, because I just feel like we should talk about it. Apparently, they are enforcing more stringent penalties for people in Minnesota who impersonate police officers, service members, and military veterans. And what I wanted to ask you was, is there a problem with that there? What's going on?
I don't know if there is or not, but, it's a good thing they are. You know what I mean? That's kind of a strange law. You know what I mean?
Well, and it's very, it's high up there in this, they were passing a bunch of laws, a $2 billion public safety. That was, right at the top of the list.
Wow. That is insane. I'm surprised. It's the first I heard about that one, but, then again, evidently there has been some fraud going on, and they need to, clamp down on that. That's interesting, weird. Especially the police officer part. I mean, that seems to have been a theme in the last few years where people have used posing as a police officer. We've covered stories like that to
We
pull
have.
people
Yeah,
over.
I think we did a headline about it. Didn't we?
And I want to say it was there too.
It
in
very well
Minnesota.
might have been. And so that it has been an issue of some concern, and it really what it was is, now I'm reading further on this. Yeah, of course, the bill approved Springs includes policy, including those that aim to try to fraudulently obtain benefits, claiming to be law enforcement officer to get into buildings that are off limits to the public and other targets. Yeah, basically what this is really at the heart of is because there has been some issues with some posing as police officers in the state. In fact, there was an issue with that not too long in Maple Grove, I want to say, and I think that this is why Warren Limmer of Maple Grove was really sponsoring this bill, is there was an individual pulling people over claiming to be, I think, a state trooper. And
Well, how could that not be against the law already?
you would think it would be, and now that you're jogging my memory, that's exactly what was going on. And of course, if they're trying to get into places they should not be by presenting false credentials, let's just face it, you can buy a badge online that looks pretty damn official.
Wow.
You know what I mean? You could buy, stuff like that to really get you into places. In fact, I want to say one of the sites I was kind of looking at back when we were covering all that stuff is there's places you can get FBI credentials that look legit.
That's great. It's crazy that anybody would ever even think to do that because, I just can't even imagine. I assumed that it was already against the law there, though. That's the part that's kind of blowing my mind a little bit.
I would have
dark web.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, the dark web. I would have assumed that there would have been already a law in place.
Yeah,
Reminds
saying
me
that-
from the scene in Hocus Pocus where they're desperately pleading to the police officer on the motorcycle, and turns out it's a Halloween costume.
Sure. Well, it's also said it's what is it? It's broadened to make more specific actions a misdemeanor. It's a misdemeanor if you were to pretend to be a cop or anyone or any other authority figure. So it's just
unless they're convicted of a similar crime within 5 years, then it can be raised to a felony.
Yeah, exactly.
I would think too if they gain material goods out of it.
And that's really what they're aiming that at too.
That could if that rises above the threshold, that could make it a felony as well. In other words, if you defraud someone out of thousands of dollars.
Yep, exactly. So that'll be interesting. Well, it did get passed. It is law. I'm curious if other states have similar laws. I'm not seeing anything in here that cites other states doing this, so they may be spearheading this.
I had always assumed that impersonation of a cop was illegal.
I always thought it was. I mean, this is strange. I thought it was illegal to do so, but evidently here in Minnesota it was not up until the first.
It is a crime in California, I can tell you that for sure.
I would imagine it is. It should be in Minnesota, but evidently now, because this is really aimed, at a whole bunch of things, but boy, they really, the impersonation of a police officer was an issue, especially down in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area, where they did have a few people pretending and posing as police detectives, police officers, state troopers, things like that, claiming to be the police to get into people's homes sometimes, stuff like that. Oh. So really, quite honestly, it's a law that needs to be on the books, and thank God it is, to penalize these people. But that isn't saying I would have thought it already would have been a law. I'm right there with you, Clarissa, but I'm looking. I'm not seeing... There's a few here, but they really don't have teeth, so to speak, a lot of these laws. You got to prove it was to obtain monetary gain. Yeah, I mean, that's where the threshold is if they use it to, according to this law, that they use it to obtain benefits, monetary gain, things such as that, then they could be charged with a crime.
I would think a much less visible, but probably more common and even more perhaps pernicious angle would be the military veteran angle, because there's lots of benefits
Sure.
In
sure.
healthcare and in housing.
Well,
There's
sure.
lots of things that if you're in official registered veteran, that's a big bonus.
But I think the police officer thing is a great. What they're targeting, and everything else seems to be aside. Because the thing of it is, like I was saying, that's immediate. We immediately respect police, right? And so if a person shows up and says, "I'm Officer Jones from da-da-da-da police department," more often than not, we're going to comply with whatever Officer Jones says. And that, as I'm reading more into
if we have no reason to doubt them, yes, absolutely right.
Yeah, because as I'm reading the actual bill here at the Minnesota House, what they just passed, that's indeed something that was cited in the minutes, of course, on the floor when they were debating this bill, is that very scenario of the respect and the compliance given to police officers. And then, of course, everything else is added as a side to stop the hemorrhage of money going to people that are not they don't deserve the money. So that's but mainly the way I'm reading it.
California and Nevada law, at least, are impersonating a cop. Doesn't matter why you're doing it, just doing it is a crime.
Well, yeah, exactly. You know what? If you got a badge on your shirt and you're running around like you're Johnny Law, come on. That's insane, and there should be stricter laws. It shouldn't even be a misdemeanor. It should be an absolute felony right away.
I would think so. It's a misdemeanor in California and in Nevada, but they can get the charges bumped up depending on what happened.
Well, exactly, because, I mean, like I said, here in Minnesota, there was some issue with impersonation of law enforcement officers. And really, looking on the internet, like last time, like I was saying, we were doing all these headlines about it. Yeah, you can order yourself a really official-looking badge and the uniforms. You know, costume stores, stuff like that, they all stock the uniforms. So, yeah, definitely good law. Support the law, and hopefully they'll add more to that whole thing as they go, because there's a lot of shysters out there, folks. A lot of shysters looking to get the free buck.
Yeah, no kidding. But you know what? You don't always have to pretend to be a cop, at least not to carry a firearm. Because in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, a 25-year-old pulled a gun out of her wedding dress, and she pulled it on the husband that she just married.
So let me get this straight. You're down there in old Tennessee, which is a beautiful state, don't get me wrong, full of beautiful people. There they are at the wedding, newlyweds. The bride turns around and pulls the 6-shooter on the new husband. Are you kidding me?
I guess it was a couple of hours after the ceremony, but she was still in her dress, and she pulled a 9mm gun, held it to his head, and pulled the trigger. But it wasn't loaded.
Oh.
Did she know it wasn't loaded?
Well, apparently, because a witness told police that the bride then loaded a round into the chamber and fired a shot into the air.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Wow. So man, that is not a wife that I'd want. I would think that divorce will be in short order.
For his sake, I truly, truly hope so.
Oh my gosh! So here we are. We're newlyweds, wedding night, and she's packing heat in the garter belt. And does it cite why she got so angry at him?
It doesn't. It doesn't say why. They said that witnesses heard a loud argument, but it doesn't say what it was.
So she opted for the Smith & Wesson instead of marriage counseling.
Apparently, well, I think it's faster, if nothing else.
Well, sure, about 1,200 feet per second.
Very immediate in this day and age of very short attention span.
Wow.
I guess she's taking the notion of security mom to its farthest.
Well, I want to know, Eric, where she was hiding this gun. I mean, wedding dresses.
Maybe in her bustier.
Yeah, I was gonna say that you don't conjure up ideas of conceal and carry on a wedding dress.
No, but some wedding dresses are pretty big, like with the big skirt with all the floofy ruffles and stuff.
Sure. Maybe you went to take off the
train, in her caboose.
She pulls it out of the guard. I just don't know where to go on this one, man. I really don't. So, that poor guy, she pulls the trigger on an empty chamber, maybe just to scare him. and the gun was not loaded, and then she chambers around and fires it in the air. Wow, man.
Yes.
That is quite the wedding.
Yeah, because I do not wish ever to besmirch any organization, but I wonder if she'll end up being called NRA bride or some such thing.
the locked and loaded lover or something.
She will have pictures. She'll have portraits and mugshots in her wedding dress.
She will. Look at that. Yeah, I mean, it's free photography.
Yeah, was the photographer
I get
around?
it.
Was the videographer still there?
Oh, that would have been excellent. I don't think so. I think they may have gone somewhere else, but wow.
I get it now. I totally get it. She won the mug shots for free wedding photographer. Yeah, use that as a free wedding photographer. Come on. Have you seen the price?
Maybe she had a cocktail too many.
I was just about to say, I wonder if there's a little moonshine involved.
I would not doubt it. It doesn't. There's none of those details, but just that story alone, I was, quite the wedding.
It is highly visual. It is suggestive visually, is it not? We can just picture her, kind of like a cartoon figure. She's kind of like a biker chick, and she hauls that thing out of there, and she's tatted up, and
packing heat. Packing heat,
man. Oh, boy.
Have you guys ever been to a wedding where it turned ugly?
No.
Yeah. I bet there are people out there who, when they heard that story, man, that is a wet dream.
What did you just say, a wet dream?
Weddings are typically, yeah. Weddings are typically kind of boring, so yeah, I mean,
well, they are. I mean, I've been in that church weddings of people I really could care less about, and you're sitting there going, okay, is this thing ever going to get done? Because I realize that they're going to have an open bar. So, I'm waiting, come on. I do, come on. Say, and if you're really screwed, and nothing against them, of course, but Catholic weddings are really long. I'm like ultra long.
They can be,
Yeah. I was at one that was like 2.5 hours long, and it was the traditional Roman Catholic wedding. And God bless them, don't get me wrong, but man, for the rest of us, and this is in July in a church with no air conditioning. So,
my youngest brother's first wedding was pretty much full-on traditional Catholic. I don't think it was that long, but it was long.
Well, the father, the priest, had a sermon and everything else, and don't get me wrong, it was cool and it was fun, and you know what, I'm all about tradition, but not when I look at the thermometer on. They happened to have a thermometer on the wall, and I looked over there. It said 97 degrees and rising. In a church full of people, it's like, come on, move it along here. And I want to say that. I think it was the groom might have got woozy or something. It was really quite the to-do. This is years ago, and I haven't been back to a wedding other than my own, of course, since. So it's all good. It's all good. I have no interest in going to another wedding. But now if everybody was packing heat, that might be a whole nother story.
Yeah, but you'd have to wear your body armor, I would say.
I would say, wear a flak jacket. And make sure that you can return fire if need be.
What's your wedding theme? Body armor,
guns and ammo.
I would go to that one. If that was the theme, I would so be there. Or shoot your own dinner. Anything.
Yeah, we're having a guns and ammo honeymoon.
Well, non-traditional weddings are all the rage these days. I'm always seeing stories about goth weddings or zombie weddings. It's on and on and on. So this would just be, arsenal wedding.
Yeah, exactly.
Flamethrowers.
That's right. Yeah, show up in a tank instead of, the limo.
I love a tank. Come rolling up to the back of the church.
That's right. And have it fire a couple of blanks just to get everyone's attention.
Just for fun.
Kaboom. Why not? Have fun. You're only going to get married presumably, hopefully once, so you may as well make it go out with a bang. You know what I'm saying? But speaking of going out, we got to run a break. When we come back, we'll be back in 2 minutes with more of your true crime headlines. Don't go anywhere. After Hours AM, the Criminal Code. We'll be right back after a word from these sponsors.
Green light. Hey girl, school zone. I'm getting hungry. Car changing lanes. You want to meet me for pizza? Stop sign. Intersection clear. Yeah, street. Pizza sounds good. Ballin Street? Girlin Street!
It's hard to concentrate on two things at once, like texting and driving. Stop the text, stop the wrecks. How will you stop texting and driving? Tell us at stoptextstopwrecks.org. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
This is Jen McGowan, founder of Wayward Souls Promotions, a company dedicated to helping individuals, teens, radio shows, and others that are seeking exposure for their individual events, conventions, and shows. We offer a wide variety of advertising, such as web-based article, social media posts, podcast advertisement, and so on. Contact us at paranormalpromotion@gmail.com, visit us on Facebook at Wayward Souls Promotions, and visit our website at www.waywardsoulspromotions.com.
Welcome back to After Hours AM, the Criminal Code. We are back. Welcome back to After Hours AM, the Criminal Code, and welcome back to True Crime Headlines, brought to you by thecriminalcode.com, your one-stop shop for your true crime fix. Visit it. Go over to thecriminalcode.com. All right, Clarissa, what's next in the old true crime hopper?
Well, there was somebody that, we just talked about the wedding, and now this is a very sad one. This happened out here in California. Nearly 3 months after she went missing, a 22-year-old woman's body was found inside of a car parked outside of a Walmart.
Oh, not a Walmart. Oh.
Yes, a Walmart.
All the bad crimes happen outside of a Walmart. Have you ever noticed that? There's going to be anything bad happening outside of a Walmart.
Walmarts are crime magnets.
They really are. They should really do something about that.
The fact that she was found in a silver Volkswagen Jetta, and she was last seen at a rehabilitation center, like a drug rehabilitation center, and the store security cameras only go back 60 days, but video shows that the car was parked there for at least 90 days before anyone found her. The windows were somewhat tinted, I guess, and there was a sunscreen over the front of the
Hold on a
car.
second. Nobody at Walmart in 90 days saw this car parked there 24/7 for 90 days and never stopped and talked to their manager saying, I've seen this car. I think it's an abandoned vehicle. It took them 90 days to figure that out. Man, they're a regular bunch of Kojaks, aren't they?
90 days.
Where was she in the car?
I think in the back seat, maybe.
Wow.
So if anyone had anyone, including her fellow customers, if anyone had simply peered in the window of the car, they would have seen a steadily deteriorating body in the back seat for 90-plus days. This reminds me of the Kitty Genovese. I mean, how can people be so removed from reality? I guess everyone, when they were walking by this car, they were on their phone.
Yeah, you would have thought that she would have smelled.
That's actually, that's what I was thinking, that if you park next to it, you'd think you would have.
Because a human body decomposing is pretty darn stinky from all accounts. That it's not something you want to be around.
I refuse to believe, I just don't believe that no one ever, at any time, with the volume of bodies, people, no pun intended, with the volume of people who go to a Walmart in the course of 90 days, that no employee, no guy who returned all of the carts, the shopping cart, all of that, no one ever peered in once. Did they think it was like a haunted house prop or what? A disintegrating body? I mean, come on, that's just madness.
Well, it also, like you said, it speaks to how oblivious maybe some people really are to their surroundings. So, I mean, you have this car that's been sitting there for 90 days. Not 9, not 10, not 8, but 90 days. At some point, you would think that even a cop coming through would go like, boy, I've seen that car there a long time. Let's go check it out.
Yeah.
Okay.
But just the store manager would notice.
You would think so. You would think the store manager. Now, who happened upon, does it say her body?
They didn't say in the story that I read, and they did say that she had pretty darkly tinted windows on the car, and there was a sunshade covering the dashboard. So it made it a little bit more difficult, I think, to see inside. But just like you were saying, I mean, even if you're a regular shopper at that Walmart, I think I would notice it if there was a vehicle for 90 days, the same vehicle in the same spot.
No, well, was she murdered, or what'd she die of?
Well, that's the very sad part. They have not released a cause of death, but the woman's sister said that she left a note and a drug needle was found. Oh. So presumably it was suicide.
That is very sad, and what a way to leave your remains. You know.
I'm thinking she probably thought she'd be found really quickly, though.
Well, not at a Walmart, man. They want their Chinese goods at an affordable price. They don't want to be troubled with cars in the parking lot.
My gosh. So, I mean, because there's a lot of traffic. You
sure.
Why didn't her family notice that she was missing for 90 days?
They did. The drug rehabilitation center that she absconded from reported that she went missing. And people, I think, looked for her. But, nobody found that her car was there until 90 days. Yeah.
That is really, really a sad story. And it kind of speaks to maybe a little bit of our disconnect. People in general. Hell, I've been guilty of it too, and it reminds me of a story that I posted on Facebook that got some grief over. I put it's obvious a satirical commentary saying that over 100 pounds of rat meat or whatever is in the United States food source. I mean that you could be eating rat. Well, what was funny is people, and don't get me wrong, I'm not bashing these people at all, but they didn't think for a second that maybe this is not real, because it really kind of showed how disconnected we are even from our own food sources. That you would go, really? Rat? I mean, the first thing I thought is, whatever. But people really were believing that particular story. I had to say something. Hey, guys, any rational thinking individual would realize this is satirical. It is not real. It just shows how far we've come, disconnected from our food sources. But the reason why I brought that up is because that same oblivion would work in this situation as well. Not wanting to really see anything, not really caring maybe about what's going on. And that speaks a lot about society as a whole.
Yeah, I agree. And it's, people are so oblivious to what's going on with their phones, just to anything else that's not happening on their screens. I think they get completely blind to. And then on the flip side of that we have a story right after that where I think people also become weirdly obsessed sometimes with a story or with, some sort of urban legend, like you were saying, Joel, that they believed that story.
Yeah.
That you posted because it's on the internet. We're going to believe it.
Yeah.
And there have been at least 3 people now in the Rocky Mountains who have died. They're dead because they're searching supposedly for some buried treasure.
I heard I read an article a little bit about this, but I'll let you fill everyone in.
Yeah, so there's an artist named, his last name is Fenn. I can't remember his first name. But,
Fenn. It's the Forrest Fenn treasure hunt.
Forrest Fenn, and he said that he buried over $2 million worth of, I think, gems, $2 million treasure in the Rocky Mountains, and that he left clues. So he left clues for people. If you find it, it's yours. Well, people are very convinced that this is real, and they have tried to find it. And the latest victim is a kid. He's 31. His name is Eric Ashby. He went missing last month while searching for the treasure in the Rocky Mountains. He was last seen rafting on the Arkansas River, and he fell off the raft and never resurfaced. Later, they found about 10 to 15 miles downstream from where the raft overturned, they found human remains.
Well, why don't they make this Forrest Fenn just call it off or come clean about maybe there not being any treasure to stop this madness? I mean, obviously you can't charge Forrest Fenn with a crime because these people are probably going out there on their own volition.
Right.
But
yeah, exactly.
There's got to be a point where, he steps in and says, okay, or gives a clue that someone will find it or what have you, because that's ridiculous.
Well, the police chief, because this is 3 people now. So, Eric Ashby was just the most recent one. So the police chief actually reached out to Forrest Fenn to ask him to call it off because, what Police Chief Caseta said is that people start to make decisions that aren't based in good, sound judgment when it comes to money. And
I'm sorry. I had to put the phone down. I just came back. Another toll booth. Now that we're in Ohio, I actually know a fair amount about this whole hunt thing. It's been covered on actually several of the investigation or adventure shows. I know Josh Gates did it. Other shows have covered it, and the guy is an art collector and an outdoorsman, and his whole point was he wanted people to just get out and experience nature, and he thought he had to offer this kind of an incentive. He insists it's real. The treasure is real. It's not large. It's just in basically a smallish treasure chest, but it's jewels and coins and whatnot, and certainly worth. He claims anyway, something like $2 million, right?
Yeah.
So I did not know about the death, but that obviously puts the whole situation in a very different light and takes it away from kind of a fun, adventure, outdoorsy, get out there and explore and put your phone down. That's the guy, Fenn, that's his big thing is people should be outdoors, they should be doing things, they should be exploring, they should be getting exercise, they got to put down their phones and blah, blah, blah. It would be hard to call it off. I guess he could just go get it. That would be the way to call it off.
Yeah.
Just go retrieve it. Because all these clues, are in his book. They're in essentially a biography, manifesto kind of thing. And it's in there that he gives all these various clues. And, there's thousands of people who've been wrapped up in this. There's people who've dedicated years to trying to find this. And there's all kinds of disagreement as to what the clues mean and where they are and, where they go. It's because it's a huge area. It's essentially the, Rocky Mountains.
Yeah. Well, the thing of it is the police have reached out to him, and it doesn't seem as if he is willing to give in. Forrest Fenn, speaking of him, he's not willing to give in. Fenn, the art dealer, claims of hidden $2 million seemed against the idea of calling it off, according to local reports. So we will have to see. I would be, there's got to be a certain point where he'll become culpable to something here, because you just can't keep sending people to their death. But then again, they are going willingly. It's not like he's telling them you must go. They are going on their own volition. So, I guess treasure hunter beware would be the story in that one.
Oh, yeah, don't go unprepared. He did say one thing on an interview after this, that he's not going to, he doesn't want to call off the hunt, but he said that he hid this treasure when he was about 80 years old. So, quote, it's not hard to get to.
Yeah, obviously.
Meaning stop doing this ridiculous stuff.
Yeah, it's probably under a tree somewhere or something, buried or whatever.
Right? It's probably,
it's probably in his backyard. He probably looks at it going, yeah, I know right where it is. Ha, 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 wink and a nod. And
he's given some hints along the way, kind of after the fact, and he, like you just said, he said it, does not take extraordinary effort. Anyone can do it. It's not far off of a path. It's not in a dangerous area. I don't know. I'm trying to think about what the liability could be. In other words, he is not literally forcing anyone to do anything. He just created a scenario where people are enticed to get out there and beat the bushes, as it were. That's a very interesting kind of I'm sure there's no criminal aspect, but might there be civil aspect. That part, I think, might be more feasible than the criminal.
Very well could be. I mean, really, it could be civil action. I could see that because the threshold of liability is much smaller or much easier to cross than it is in a criminal threshold.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, I
lower
agree.
burden of proof.
Yep, exactly. So really, that could be where we end up on that, is it will be somebody going, hey, wait a minute. I risked life and limb to find your treasure, or my brother or sister or cousin, and they didn't come back alive. I want some money.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that could see happening. So, you know what? If you guys are out there, if our listeners are out there looking for the treasure, be careful. Come on. We don't want to see you on the news. We don't want to talk about you. Be safe looking for this treasure. Again, his last little clue was, hey, man, it's not that hard to find the treasure. So hopefully the treasure is real. He claims it is. He adamantly claims it is, but hopefully it truly is real. So moving along, Clarissa, where do we go next?
We are going to South Carolina.
South Carolina, sure.
Yes. So there is an inmate in South Carolina named Jimmy Causey who was sentenced to life for kidnapping. However, he escaped recently by allegedly receiving wire cutters and a cell phone from
Amazon.
A drone.
A drone flew in and
Yep.
gave this guy wire cut. Did he order off Amazon? They flew the little drone in or something? I mean, you know, what did he do? I mean, how did the cops not see a drone flying above them with implements of destruction to get out?
That's the thing, though. I mean, people that aren't familiar with prisons and how large and how much area they can cover. Most of the prisons that I visit in the northern part of the state here, they cover huge, vast amounts of area. And yes, there are towers, but the towers are primarily looking down at the inmate yards, and typically when the inmates are in those yards.
Well, I was going to say,
otherwise they're looking at traffic and other things.
Is there no sniper gallery? Come on.
There is, but I especially like if it's a drone that's really far off, is it even going to look like that? Is it just going to look like a bird? I mean, I don't blame them for missing it, honestly.
Well, that's pretty ingenious. I mean, really to have a drone bring in your file and saw, usually
law of unintended consequences.
Yeah,
yes.
Generally.
I'm telling you.
Go ahead, man.
We keep finding new issues with drones, and that's just going to keep going on. We're not far off from, delivery by drone. I mean, that's going to become commonplace.
Trying to control airspace above a prison. I mean, I know that airspace above a prison, it is illegal to fly anything into it, but drones can be very small and very quick. And
I know, but come on.
Zipping it out.
Yep. I know, but I gotta say that is pretty ingenious on the part of the guy escaping and whoever helped him. Really,
yes,
exactly. It's well beyond the saw in the cake.
Exactly.
Yes.
Normally it's cake and files we gotta look out for. Now it's drones. Who ultimately caught him?
Well, so we don't know how he did get caught 1,200 miles away in Texas, and he was caught in a motel. He was sleeping in a motel. But the most interesting thing about this guy is that he escaped in 2005 as well. And his location was given up so he escaped with a compatriot in 2005, and he was foiled by a pizza delivery driver.
A pizza boy caught him.
I think it was a pizza girl, actually. So they ordered a pizza at a hotel that he and this other escapee were staying at, and they instructed the driver to come in, leave the pizza on the table, and take the cash that was left there.
Just as a drop off.
Right, and so the driver told her husband later that night, and I guess her hubby was like, I think we should probably call somebody.
Yeah.
So they did. The police showed up, and that's who it was.
Wow. So by being overly cautious, that's like a drunk driver, tooling down the highway at the freeway at 40 miles an hour and getting caught for being too cautious.
Exactly, because she may not have recognized that they were escapees. You have to be watching the news or looking at flyers. Like, it would have been better just to give her the money and take the pizza.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Too clever by half, as they say.
Yeah. I just actually, when you're reading that, I saw a headline that grabbed my attention. I'll just say it really quick. Get this headline. Phone sex operator claims minimum wage violation in class action suit. What?
Oh my!
For the first minute and each minute after that, a phone sex operator has filed a lawsuit claiming their employer is in violation of minimum wage laws. While
minimum wage is by the hour, not by the minute.
I know. While expectant customers can pay up to $5 a minute, the operators shockingly only got paid 10 cents to 7 cents per minute. Meaning at best, operators would be making only $6 per hour, potentially only $4.20 per hour. Other services are equally unimpressive.
Wow. Yeah, that's robbery. That
is sorry.
That's a rip.
Totally caught my eye while we were talking, but but
there's two stories left. I would love to get to them if we can.
Let's do it.
Because one's in Florida and it's fabulous.
God, we got to have one Florida one. We always have to. That's the law.
Florida man.
It is Florida man. So in Florida, in Bradenton, Florida, a person whose last name is Ross, I didn't get the first name, but he went around, he's an internet star, by the way.
Gotcha.
And he decided to steal a bunch of stop signs in his town because he just said there's way too many stop signs in this town. So he went around and dug up and collected a bunch of them.
Oh, sure. Why not?
You mean on camera, of course.
Oh, well, of course. He's the internet star after all. So he's got to throw that on the old YouTubes. Yeah,
so you threw it up on YouTube. And so the deputies showed up and placed him in handcuffs. And now he's got a crowdfunding video because he doesn't have enough money for bail due to his third-degree felony charge.
Wow. And now, according to this, he has 500,000 followers.
Wow, really?
And he's as a self-appointed city traffic flow coordinator.
Do you know what he was doing in 2013 that he was arrested for?
What was he doing in 2013?
Giving strangers wedgies at a Rays game.
No!
You know what this does? I've been with my kids, of course, over the weekend. We've been traveling around and went to some colleges. Spent some time in New York City. Really had a lot of fun. It was actually a nice break, and I think Lily is well on her way to making decisions. We're looking at various theater schools. Anyway, so I've been hearing their conversation, and they are very much of the YouTube generation. So they know all these YouTube stars, and there's a whole new wave, you see, of former Vine stars, because Vine has been shut down.
Right.
So now they've all moved over to YouTube. So I'm hearing about their various antics and behaviors and who's in and who's out. And it just really reinforces what I had already picked up, that, there's just no such thing as out of bounds as far as what they will put up on, as quote-unquote entertainment. They will do anything.
Yeah, well,
literally.
That's just
anything for the eyeballs.
Yeah, they will keep on going and going and going and pushing the envelope to get more likes and more subscriptions, more subscribers, and really gain famous in their eyes. But now he's in trouble yet again, and I would imagine he'll do a little time over this one. He has to do a little time over this one.
I would think so. Because he's been arrested before. It is a third-degree felony. I would imagine that he will too. It is a felony charge, and it is deserved because it puts. I like it or not. I don't care if there's 20 stop signs in a row. It's public safety. You can't mess with public safety. And I can't believe that somebody wasn't telling him. Like, was somebody else filming it, or was he filming it? Because you'd think that the person that he put in charge of filming him would say, "Is this a good idea?" Or
would they be accessories? Now, would the people?
Oh yeah, they probably would. So maybe he was just filming himself.
Because then wouldn't they be accessories if they're filming it? And of course, this guy, man, I'm reading this, and he's been in trouble before, and it doesn't seem to really bother him. Some of the statements he's putting out there, like appointing himself traffic planner. Come on. This guy knew what was going to happen, and he's just kind of putting the old thumb up at him, going, nah, it's not happening. Thumbing his nose at him. Take that, Johnny Law, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And
it really emphasizes what we've talked about. I mean, it's like almost every week lately, where this disconnect from reality, that somehow if you are filming it, if you are recording it, if it is going up on social media, it is somehow not real.
Yeah.
You know, like we talked about with the sister watching her sister die.
I know, that was still shocks me.
I mean, how else? The only psychological thing I come up with is there's just some disconnect between the concept of what is real life and what is entertainment / the internet, and seems to be just anything goes.
Yeah, and that's sad. That's really sad because, I mean, we did all of our dumb crap before the internet and before YouTube.
Thank goodness,
you know,
man,
so
seriously.
you know, we don't, you know, we look back and go, wow, was I stupid? And thank God no one remembers that. Now it's out there forever.
It is not documented. Exactly.
Yep. Now it's out there forever. Once you put it on the internet, it is out there forever.
Hey, do you know what really snaps you back into reality? A taser.
No, it really does, very, very quickly. You're right. It would.
Is that the final story, Clarissa?
It is, and I have to
whip it on us.
All right, it is a YouTube thing again.
All right, more YouTube.
So it is these they're called the Viral Brothers, right? They're from the Czech Republic. They were visiting the U.S. They've been filming short prank videos that typically involve an unsuspecting victim tricked into reacting, all right? So the brothers apparently were on the freeway or whatever in traffic, and a guy in a Lamborghini cut them off in traffic.
Oh, boy.
Yep. So they follow this guy into a parking lot, and the pair decide that they are going to plant. And why do they have this with them? Anyway, they're going to plant a piece of plastic feces.
Poop.
Yes, on the car, with one of them squatting over it to make it appear as though
it was the real thing.
The real thing.
Okay.
Residue.
All right.
Yes.
Poop jokes never get old. I don't care how old you are. But go ahead.
Right. So one of them is squatting over the car with this fake, poop, and the other one is filming. The car's driver reappears. He's upset, so he tases him.
Oh, no.
He reached into his pocket, pulled out a stun gun, and fired it at him. Yep.
And then the real poop came out.
There's so many things gone awry here. Because, first of all, what they were doing was unquestionably wrong. It's someone else's property. But can you tase somebody for pulling a prank that isn't endangering your life? I don't think so.
I'm not sure that I would think that you were held to the same standards as a firearm or the taser, you would think.
Right. Well, because it can. If someone's got heart problems, there's all sorts of issues. Like a stun gun is supposed to be used when you feel endangered.
Yeah, you just can't run around tasing each other, which I have seen people do that.
I assume this means tasers are legal. Is it legal to own a taser?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Yes,
you can order one right on Amazon right now and have it shipped to your house.
You can. Yes. I've seen that.
Wow.
They even have cute ones that are pink and such.
That's right. The pink thumper. And it'll come and it'll thump
the
you,
real
man.
question here is, did they tase him in the compromising position? In other words, it was just like a buns up eye affair or what?
Yeah, maybe it hit the brown note.
There's supposedly a video of it. I've not seen it myself.
Well, I'll be checking out this video for the benefit of our listeners. I'll be checking this out.
Obviously,
I would never just watch it for fun. Yeah, exactly. But we got to run to break, everybody. When we come back, we're going to dive deeper into a very serious subject of depression and suicide and prevention and all those things in between. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back right after this. After Hours AM, the Criminal Code. We'll be right back after a word from these sponsors.
Ranger Station, Ranger speaking.
Yeah, hi. I'd like to report a bear sighting.
Location.
My backyard.
Oh, your backyard. Try telling a bear that.
I did, and this bear talked back.
Talking bear, that's rich.
No, wait, it was Smokey Bear.
Smokey? Why didn't you say so?
I did say so.
Continue.
I was burning yard waste.
No, boy.
He told me to burn legally and responsibly, and to remember that if it's too hot to touch, it's too hot to leave.
And as always, he's right. You know, 9 out of 10 wildfires are caused by humans. That means 9 out of 10 wildfires can be prevented.
Yeah, I know that now.
Thanks to me.
Actually, thanks to Smokey.
As usual, the talking bear gets all the credit. Get your Smokey on. Always burn responsibly and contact your local fire department for open burning regulations. Because 9 out of 10 wildfires can be prevented. Brought to you by Smokey Bear, the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council. Learn more at smokeybear.com.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Hi, Tom Bodette. If you can hear me, then you have an internet connection, which means you can do cool things online, like listen to streaming radio, obviously, or watch a video of a monkey washing a cat. Let your freak flag fly. Or you can book a room at a great price at motel6.com. Isn't the internet wonderful? Everything you want right at your fingertips, and whoa, did not need to see that. I'm Tom Bodette for Motel 6, and we'll leave the light on for you.
This is Jen McGowan, founder of Wayward Souls Promotions, a company dedicated to helping individuals, teams, radio shows, and others that are seeking exposure for their individual events, conventions, and shows. We offer a wide variety of advertising, such as web-based article, social media posts, podcast advertisement, and so on. Contact us at paranormalpromotion@gmail.com, visit us on Facebook at Wayward Souls Promotions, and visit our website at www.waywardsoulspromotions.com.
Excuse me. Thousands of cancer patients can't afford a place to stay when the best treatment is far from home. A room shouldn't be the difference between life and death. Let's make sure that everyone who needs a room gets one. Let's make some noise. Let's help the American Cancer Society finish the fight.
Text ROOM to 41518 to donate $10. Only in the forest can you see this. But nothing beats the moment you see that.
Cool!
That's your child's eyes opening up to a world of possibilities.
There are some moments only the forest can inspire. Find yours at discovertheforest.org. Learn about forests near you and discover cool things to do when you go. And you might just see this. Visit discovertheforest.org. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service and the Ad Council.
Welcome back to After Hours AM, the Criminal Code. Welcome back to After Hours AM, everybody. I'm your host, Joel Sturgis, so right along with me,
Eric Olsen and
Dr. Clarissa Cole.
And guys, we are tackling a very, very important subject tonight, and we are tackling that of depression and suicide. And as we were talking about at the top of the show, that in the last couple of years now, we've lost Robin Williams, we've lost Chris Cornell, and now Chester Bennington to this horrible disease, and it's just not them. This has become an epidemic, but it's become the very silent, and has been for years, on the silent side of the epidemic spectrum. And we have Dr. Marshall with us tonight. She's a Ph.D. and vice president of the programs. What she does really is she focuses on prevention and education. As a psychologist with experience that spans clinical, educational, and professional settings, Dr. Doreen Marshall has been engaged in local and national suicide prevention work for more than 10 years. Since joining the AFSP in 2014, Dr. Marshall has expanded AFSP's menu of education programs for both the clinicians and general audiences, and revamped the infrastructure to improve the program's delivery through a nationwide network of chapters. Dr. Marshall, I really want to thank you for joining us tonight to talk about this very, very important subject matter. And as you know, it's really come to light in the last few years with mainly through the celebrities. But as you're going to tell us, I'm sure, it's not just the celebrities that are afflicted by this.
No, you're absolutely right. And first, let me thank you for inviting me this evening. We lose many people each year to suicide. The numbers are over 43,000 people die each year by suicide. We don't talk as much about all of those deaths as we do about the celebrity deaths, but each one of those lives obviously was very important to the people who love them. Mm-hmm. What I do at the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention is I work with our chapters to educate communities about warning signs and things to look for in people we care about, and how to intervene when you're concerned about someone, how to connect them to some help.
And is there really, I got a question, and I know it's a really hard question to ask, but because it's such a varying array of people, but is there a group of people that are more risk for suicide than others? Like, are the elderly more apt to do it than the young, or vice versa?
Well, it's a great question, and I think what we've learned is that folks who are at risk often demonstrate that they're struggling. Mm-hmm. So when we look back after a person has died, in most cases we do see that the person had some mental health or emotional struggles. So folks that are depressed or folks that have been struggling with a substance use concern or other disorder, we see those folks at higher risk for suicide. But that's not the whole story, obviously. So there are other risk factors and warning signs that we look for. But the groups actually that we're concerned about, that we're losing quite a bit, are middle-aged men right now. Mm-hmm. So suicide has always, been a concern with older adults, but more recently, middle-aged men have become a group that's become a growing concern because of the numbers. So, it is something that affects all age groups to some degree. So we don't say that any one age group is immune, but we do look at the groups where there's been, where suicide has been more prevalent.
I was going to ask about that trend in particular, because when I was doing suicide prevention in the prison setting, I'm mostly a forensic psychologist. We were really looking at men who were, older. Typically, we were looking at guys who were in their very late 50s, early 60s as being at a higher risk. But just, if you just look at some of the celebrity deaths lately, it is more middle-aged men. So, I mean, is that actually a trend that's coming out now?
The data is actually showing more in middle-aged men that those numbers have kind of crept up to where the older adults' numbers were. Wow. And so seeing that, is certainly, those of us in prevention, it's something for us to pay attention to and also to try and understand so that we can figure out how best to prevent suicide, particularly in that group, since the numbers are rising.
Do you know why? I mean, is there any sort of just rudimentary sort of ideas about it?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of speculation, of course, at this point. We don't know exactly why. Suicide is pretty complex. What we do know, though, is that, one of the things that helps to prevent suicide is connecting people to help. And so when you think about middle-aged men and how they might reach out for help or not reach out for help, they tend to be a group that doesn't typically utilize mental health services in the same way as women or other age groups. So that's something for us to certainly be aware of, that they may never come to the attention of someone who's in the position to help them because they don't seek help in those traditional ways.
Now, is it cultural? Is it more Caucasian or African American, or is it all really the same?
More of the deaths are white males, so Caucasian, but no race or ethnicity is immune. So I think we have to approach suicide, in people across all cultures and across all age groups, with kind of an awareness that a person at risk could be in front of us, and that just those trends don't explain the whole story. But we do see it more prevalent in white males specifically.
I got a little bit of a story that happened to me personally. Is I knew an individual that I was working with, and he was right around 46, 47 years old. I can't remember which, and it was very shocking that he would commit suicide. But upon further discussion, and we were all shocked at the time because he seemed so happy. We're like, well, why would he do that? He just seemed completely happy. But we found out upon talking to people in his personal life that he had been going through a very bitter custody battle. He wasn't able to see his children. A lot of mitigating circumstances. But you're right, not one time did he really reach out to any of us, and we would have been there to help him as his friends had we known. But really, honestly, Dr. Marshall, he seemed absolutely chipper and happy up until they told us at work that he was found dead. Is that real common? I mean, is that more common than we realize, that there is no cry first for help?
I think what tends to happen is that, it's very hard for the people around someone who is feeling suicidal to get a complete picture, meaning in front of some people they may appear one way or another, and often the person is either masking their pain or really trying to hide what they're feeling, sometimes because they believe if people knew about it, they would be creating a burden for those people. Now, we know that that's a distorted way of thinking, that people want the opportunity to help. But I think often, it's not until after someone dies that people start putting, connecting the dots in a way, and start saying, well, looking back, I can see things now, but looking ahead, it was really hard to understand that was something that may lead to suicide. Which is why we really encourage people to ask directly if you're concerned about someone, to just ask, it seems like you're going through a tough time. Are you thinking of ending your life? Are you having thoughts of suicide? To just ask directly, because it's not going to put the idea in someone's head if they're not thinking of it. But if they have had those thoughts, it opens that line of communication. Because often we hear stories like the one you just told, where people say they really didn't have a sense of how much the person was struggling until after the person's gone.
Well, as a middle-aged man myself, I have various thoughts. First of all, you're supposed to be the rock. You're supposed to be mature enough, and you've been around enough, and you have kids, and you may even have grandchildren, and you're in the middle of it all, and you're not supposed to be the one who struggles. You're supposed to be the one that everyone leans on, and the corollary to that is what we've seen developing. I mean, it's always been there, of course, but it seems to have been heightened over the last few decades, say, is you're also now part of that sandwich generation where you're taking care of your parents and you're taking care of kids. I mean, my 84-year-old father just died a month ago. I have an 85-year-old mother, and I still have 2 teenage children. I have adult children, but I also have teenage children. So there are times when I really do feel pretty overwhelmed at being in the middle of all that and being the one that people do depend upon. And I mean, I myself have not really faced those kinds of feelings, at least thus far, and hopefully, of course, I won't. But, I mean, I can certainly understand how someone who is perhaps more inclined just due to, whatever, genetics or chemicals or whatever, more inclined in that direction could easily feel very overwhelmed and feel like they, just what you said, they don't want to burden anyone. That's not supposed to be their job. They're supposed to be the rock.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true, that also how society, I think, men are socialized to be that way in a way that doesn't make it easy when they're struggling for them to reach out to get support. Sure.
Well, I grew up, I'm 42 years old, almost 43, but I grew up with the boys don't cry era. You know what I mean? You're supposed to be a man, toughen up, all those things. And, it really doesn't, thank God we've evolved since those days. And we're not so rigid. You know what I mean? That we understand, we have a better handle, at least we think we do anyway, have a better handle on this. But I was reading a very interesting article, I want to say it was in the Rolling Stones, citing that people that like the musicians and the comedians, they struggle with depression. The artistic folks seem to they struggle with it, and I don't know if this is true or not, struggle with depression more likely to have it than the average person.
I think we had talked about this a little bit before, and I'd mentioned this on the post that I did too, is that, particularly in Chris Cornell's case and Chester Bennington's case, there was a lot of negative rehearsal going on, meaning that a lot of their songs were autobiographical and they focused on a lot of the very dark periods in their lives. And when your entire career, and Robin Williams, he's a comic, but a lot of his comedy also focused on some of the very dark periods when he was very drug addicted in his life. And when your shows kind of revolve around this negative rehearsing negative life events over and over again, correct me if I'm wrong, doctor, but doesn't some of that sort of lend toward depressive feelings after a while?
Well, I think it's a tough question to answer because it's hard to know whether someone's struggling with depression and then because of that they're gravitating toward, kind of that subject matter, or if vice versa, if the subject being immersed in the subject matter is impacting them in a way that's making them feel sadder. Or, what we do know about folks who are suicidal is often there's ways that they do try and communicate that. And so, but I think what gets challenging for those of us in prevention is that we often realize that looking back. Mm-hmm. So after someone's made an attempt or after someone has died. So I think, for example, in the instances you're talking about, I don't think anyone looked at those individuals and their music and automatically thought suicide risk. But now that the person has died by suicide, when you look back and see, the lyrics that talk about that or kind of, it kind of connects differently, which is why we really try and encourage people to pay attention to what people around them are doing and ask, ask what that's about or ask, because I think now lots of folks are looking back and that's the hard part in prevention when you see it only from that angle.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would definitely agree. I've been down that dark road. Me personally, I've been really depressed where I've thought those kind of thoughts, we're only human and we all have that limit, there's that limit that you feel that you're reaching, that you just can't do it anymore. But if there was anyone out there at that limit right now listening, we have a big audience and we appreciate our audience. We love our audience. The number for the National Suicide Prevention Hotline is 1-800-273-8255. Again, 1-800-273-8255. That is answered 24 hours a day. If you need help, don't be afraid. Reach out, and reach out quickly. But that being said...
I would also...
Oh, go ahead, doctor.
Oh, I would also add that there's also a crisis text line. You can text the word TALK to 741-741, and you can get a trained person over text if you're feeling distressed.
Yeah,
wow.
Yeah,
that's amazing. That's great.
Yeah, and I mean, you've done so much work, doctor. I mean, reading what you've done and how you've helped so many people, and really it's commendable. But what do we have to, in your opinion, change society to get this a better understanding? What needs to change in our culture as a whole?
I think, it's a great question, and I think paying attention to the people around us and really encouraging help seeking and encouraging people not to wait if they're feeling bad or if they're having thoughts about suicide, to not wait, that's a sign that you're in distress, and to reach out for that help. I think if we treated mental health concerns the same way we treat other physical health concerns, this would have a much different picture. I think the hard part about mental health concerns is that they're often hidden from people. They don't often show up as easily as if you had a broken leg or had some other physical health concern. So it really requires us to pay attention, to ask when we're concerned about somebody. Chances are if you've thought about it, if you've wondered if someone's suicidal, chances are you may be right. And so it's important to ask, and then to help connect that person to help. Because I think many times people do not realize that if a person is suffering from depression, that there's treatment available that can help.
Very well, really very, very well said. And you can't get the help unless you ask for the help. But sometimes it's a matter of being so low and down that you don't feel as if you even want to reach out for that help. And recognizing those signs is sometimes easier said than done. Am I correct? So I guess what I'm asking is, we have to be ever vigilant to look out for these signs. But like you said, they're always subtle. But one of the best indicators?
I think a change in a person's usual behavior is probably the biggest indicator. So if someone is normally someone who shows up to work on time and suddenly they're missing a lot of work, or you go visit them and you find they're in bed all day, looking for changes in behavior, changes in sleeping patterns, eating patterns. Also, people may talk about wanting to end it or feeling like there's no way out or things will never get better. Listening for those cues that indicate that someone is feeling very hopeless. Often someone will make a statement like that, and most of us will try and reassure them, but not really pay attention to what they're saying. But I think the biggest indicator is really you're looking for a change in behavior from what is normal or typical for that person.
What should you do?
Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. What do you do once you notice that?
Yeah.
I think the first thing is to start with an honest conversation, and it's a hard conversation to have, but to say, to your friend, or, hey, I'm noticing these things, and I'm getting the sense that life's really hard right now for you. And sometimes when people feel that way, they may have thoughts of wanting to end it or wanting to kill themselves. Is it so bad that you're thinking about that? To really just ask directly. And to not take the first answer you get, but to kind of stay there and listen, because they may initially just say, no. But the more you talk to them, they may be feeling like they can trust you and willing to share more about how bad they're feeling. And then I think the next thing is to reassure them that help is available, that you're going to help them get help, that you care about them, that their life matters, and that whatever they're feeling, that you'll be a friend to them through it. I think those things, it sounds simple, but to a person in distress, it can mean the difference between them, continuing down a path of wanting to end their life or having some hope that maybe they can get help and things will start to turn around.
I think those questions, too, are so difficult to ask sometimes, because a lot of times I think the person asking has maybe a little bit of discomfort about it. I can see being, kind of like trepidatious about, do I actually say this? Will I offend them if I say this? What do you think about that when someone has that thought? What would you say to them?
Most people fear that if they say the word or if they put the idea out there, that they're somehow going to make the situation worse. And there's no evidence to support that. In fact, there's good suggestion that maybe what actually happens is the person sees that you get how much they're struggling, that you're willing to go there and have the conversation with them. So most people are afraid to bring it up because they think, I don't want to bring this up and somehow make this situation worse. And that's really what we have to overcome, is that perception, because it actually is the best way to get things on a path to getting better, is to really have a direct conversation and to work on getting the person the help they need.
So you're not putting, by asking, you wouldn't be putting any ideas into their head or anything like that, is what you're saying?
No, not by asking in that way. I think that, you're not going to make someone suicidal who's not already having some of those vulnerabilities and thinking about suicide. So that's the fear we have to get over, that we just kind of make ourselves brave enough to ask and to really say the word and to say it. Because for the person who's struggling, it feels like nobody could ever understand what this feels like. And just by you saying and asking those questions, you indicate that maybe you get it. And that really is a huge step for the person who's struggling to hear that.
It's a lifeline. Yeah, I mean, it's a lifeline for someone that's struggling. You know, at least there's somebody that I can turn to that will get it. You know, that nobody else seems to get it, but here I have this person asking me point blank, am I okay? And that makes all the difference in the world, let me tell you. It really does. And, you know, you just got to be that. Sometimes you got to be that person. Sometimes you got to be that person to get out of your own comfort zone for a minute. To ask, no matter how uncomfortable it makes us feel. You know, if Bob is struggling, you're not going to make Bob any more or less suicidal, like you know, you got both doctors have said that you have to be that person. You got to be that voice because you may be what saves their lives.
Yeah, but there's this idea, and I totally get where it's coming from. Like, okay, so what if you see Bob? Let's call him Bob, right?
Sure.
And he seems really depressed, and he's saying some of these types of things, and maybe you don't really address it because you're afraid to. And then you see Bob 2 days later, and he seems like he's doing really, really good. So he must be okay, right?
I wouldn't think so. I mean, studies have shown, at least what I've read and what I've been told, is suicide, and we just talked about this, happens on the upswing.
And it kind of waxes and wanes too, right? Oh, go ahead, Doctor.
I think what gets complicated is that, you know, kind of the impulse towards suicide it's dynamic and often fleeting. So someone may feel a lot of distress, you know, at 2 a.m. when they're watching, you know, infomercials or something, and they feel very lonely, and may not feel that same distress even just a couple hours later.
Sure.
Or if someone were to call them on the phone, they may, you know, it may not be at the same level of intensity. Might be a way of thinking of it. So, you know, I think this is one of the reasons that we have to connect with people when we realize they're struggling and help them connect with help, because it often does come and go for people. Yeah. And, you know, that's, I think, what we're trying to prevent is the person experiencing that and in that moment feeling like they have no other option to end the pain that they're in other than to end their life.
And of course, you know, I know this has been expressed to me by people that have been on that side, suicidal, that last thing you want to do is be thought as crazy or nuts or weak. And for a guy, speaking from a guy's point of view, like Eric alluded to it, we're the rocks. We're supposed to be the strong one. When everything else is falling apart, we're supposed to be there, pick it all up. Sometimes the rock crumbles a little bit. And it's not a sign of weakness. It means maybe it's a sign of being strong too long and didn't get the help soon enough.
Well, we do know that, particularly with mental health concerns, that the sooner you get the help, you know, the better kind of, in a way, the prognosis is. That the longer someone waits and struggles, you know, often it can be harder to treat. Mm-hmm. You know, it can be, you know, so we do encourage people to not wait, you know, to reach out if they're starting to have those thoughts so that they can connect to help. And it actually makes it more likely that things are going to go better in their treatment as well.
And I think, too, that depression can, not always, but it can express itself in different ways than you might expect. Like you were talking about, Dr. Marshall, with just behavioral change. I think a lot of times people are looking for the typical sort of tearfulness or just, you know, pulling away. But I used to know someone personally that made a very serious attempt, an older gentleman, and with him it expressed itself more as agitation and annoyance.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Is that common? Do you see that a lot?
You know, I think that is something, you know, to be mindful of, is that it really is a change for folks for what's normal, but or usual for them, I should say. But one of the things we do see sometimes is that agitation, almost like a rageful anger, or, you know, the feeling like someone, it feels like they're going to jump out of their skin, literally. Mm-hmm. You know, there's this sense of, I can't soothe myself, I can't calm myself down. You know, that's often a sign that the person's under a lot of stress and in distress. Yeah. But sometimes that's where, you know, they're also feeling suicidal in addition to that. So we just really need to pay attention. And if someone is, appearing like that, to really, kind of follow up with them and say, hey, this doesn't seem like you. Like, let's talk about what's happening here. And to ask those hard questions. Yeah. Because I think, that's often how we see it. It may not be what we think of as, a typical depressed person, tearful, sad, although those things are important as well.
Exactly. We have to run a break, Dr. Marshall, really quick. We'll be right back in 2 minutes. I'd like to shift gears a little bit and talk about the catalyst beforehand, and that's depression. It seems to be everywhere today, and there's a pill for everything. Well, I'd like to come back and talk about that a little bit. Be right back right after this. After Hours AM, the Criminal Code. We'll be right back after a word from these sponsors.
Northern Tool and Equipment.
I got a rather serious problem over here.
All right, what are we looking at?
Cranky mother-in-law asleep on the couch in the man cave.
Dear God.
It gets worse.
That's impossible.
She's passed out on the remote.
I stand corrected.
But what do I do?
Okay, I want you to grab a torn big red hydraulic bottle jack.
Okay.
Now you wedge that bad boy in under your mother-in-law and crank her up skyward.
It's working. And got the remote.
Great. Now grab that torn big red 2-ton folding shop crane and put that woman on wheels.
And away we go.
There's no problem a little horsepower can't solve. Northern Tool and Equipment.
This is Jen McGowan, founder of Wayward Souls Promotions, a company dedicated to helping individuals, teams, radio shows, and others that are seeking exposure for their individual events, conventions, and shows. We offer a wide variety of advertising, such as web-based article, social media posts, podcast advertisement, and so on. Contact us at paranormalpromotion@gmail.com, visit us on Facebook at Wayward Souls Promotions, and visit our website at www.waywardsoulspromotions.com.
Welcome back to After Hours AM, the Criminal Code. Welcome back to After Hours AM, the Criminal Code. I'm your host, Joel Sturgis, right along with me,
Eric Olsen and
Dr. Clarissa Cole.
And tonight we're having a great discussion. I shouldn't say great discussion, but a discussion that needs to be had with Dr. Doreen Marshall. And we're talking about depression, we're talking about suicide, and how it's just become this silent epidemic and has been for many years. It's not something that just popped up out of nowhere. But Dr. Marshall is one of the leading authorities on this very subject matter. And I'd like to shift gears a little bit and maybe talk about the catalyst to depression, or to suicide. And that would be, it would seem, on the outside looking in, Dr. Marshall, depression. You watch TV and it's all about depression medication. Why do we seem, as Americans especially, so darn depressed?
That's a really good question. Depression, as you might guess, is pretty complicated. That, there's biological factors, there's lifestyle factors that can impact depression. Stress certainly can impact depression. So somebody who has a vulnerability, if they're under a lot of stress, that can make an existing depression worse or even, bring on a depression. So, I think, not to speculate, but I think our fast-paced life and some of the modern-day stressors have really, in a way, set us up, particularly those of us that have some genetic vulnerability toward depression as well.
Would anxiety play a part in depression and suicide as well? Because I know that's another big one that I hear a lot about is anxiety. People are very anxious.
Absolutely. It does play a role, both in terms of suicide but also in terms of you often see people that are both depressed and anxious that have both of those things going on. So yeah, I mean it's really complicated, but depression and anxiety are treatable, and I think that's when you asked earlier about what needs to change. I think helping the public understand that there are things beyond medicine, although medicine is important. There are other things, therapies, lifestyle changes that can certainly impact depression and anxiety in a positive way.
Well, the thing that I always seem to find, as a kind of a treatment provider, is that people are not only sort of scared to ask about it, but I think sometimes if you're a friend of somebody, they feel unqualified to ask about it. Like they're suddenly going to get in really far over their heads and not know what to do. I mean, is there any advice that you can give? Because that's the first line of defense, is it not? Family and friends?
Yeah, I mean, I think if we wait until every person who is struggling with thoughts of suicide makes it in front of a professional person, we're going to lose a lot of people. I think what has to happen is that people who know them best have to kind of start that first conversation, because they will see them much earlier usually, and sometimes treatment professionals won't see them at all. They will never come into contact with someone who's struggling because the person will never seek help. Yeah. So I think it does start there, and I think people feeling unqualified, I think it's okay to say to someone that you're having this conversation to that, I'm not sure what to do, but I'm going to help you find out. We're going to figure this out together. And of course, to not be afraid to just listen. I think we undervalue the importance of just letting someone share how bad it is for them, and just being a listening ear and really hearing that.
It's interesting you talk about prevention and getting there soon, but if you look at a lot of healthcare plans in America especially, the first two things that always get cut is dental and mental health services when you look at a premium. I mean, my Lord, that's just insane. Do they not put that as much value on the person's mind as they do the body? I mean, I've always wondered why that is, why those essential services, especially the mental health services, seem to catch the axe first.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is all about public perceptions too, about illnesses that are treatable, and I think just kind of access to care is obviously a big issue that we struggle with, and we know it contributes to risk when people do not have access to good mental health care.
Yeah, I mean, if you're in a more urban setting, it is a lot easier. I think, I've lived in both. I think that there are oftentimes a lot of free clinics that you can go to and things like that. But keep in mind now, now with the internet, I mean, the internet's a mixed bag, right? Like some studies say it makes you feel more isolated rather than more connected. But you can always look up hotlines. There are text links like Dr. Marshall was talking about. There are internet providers that are full-on psychologists and psychiatrists that you can reach out to for a very nominal fee. So, things are becoming more available that perhaps if you were more isolated in more of a rural area, you wouldn't have access to, that people do now. It's just a question of seeking that out, which I've been depressed before, and I got to say, when I'm depressed, I'm not necessarily thinking completely clearly. I mean, is that... I think that's common. Yes. I mean, would it be strange for somebody to ask somebody else for help with kind of just basic sort of tasks? Would that be looked down upon, do you think, by somebody that's depressed?
I think, the person who's depressed is having a hard time seeing their way through, or seeing that there's some hopefulness on the other side of this. Often they don't realize that the thoughts they're having are depressed thoughts, that if they weren't depressed, they would not be feeling that things are entirely hopeless, So it's tricky, but I do think that's why it's so important for the people around us to pay attention and to really kind of, in a way, be the voice of reason when depression is convincing us otherwise. The other thing I did want to say is that I think more people are starting to talk to their primary care physicians about depression, and that's one of the things at the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention that we work to try and train other professions who may come into contact with someone who may be suicidal, such as primary care physicians or nurses or other groups, because often someone may be going to a doctor for a physical problem, but really depression is underlying what's happening physically as well.
Well, I got a quick question here from our audience, and the question is generally speaking, when that late night 911 call is placed, it's law enforcement that shows up when someone is depressed. By and large, how capable is law enforcement today in taking care of and recognizing someone in crisis?
I can speak to the law enforcement at San Quentin because I used to.
Great question.
I used to do it there. In the prison system out here, I cannot speak to the 911 operators, but in the prison system out here, they, knock on wood, are trained very well, and they're trained repeatedly because they know that they're going to be the first responders that show up. So we went from zero training of officers in the beginning to very extensive training. That's not to say that everyone is as skilled as everyone else, but they typically do know what to look for, and know when they need to refer to mental health. And so I think in the prison system out here, it's pretty good. But Dr. Marshall would have to speak to people on the outside. That I don't know.
I think you said it absolutely right. I think while results may vary and it may be depending on kind of the individual to some degree, I think law enforcement are getting more training now than ever in mental health issues and in suicide. So we have done some work with different law enforcement departments around this in terms of both having our chapters provide them some training, but also helping them support people when they do come, say, across a family who's had a loss by suicide, because often they are the ones who respond to suicide deaths as well. But I think you're right. The people are getting more, law enforcement's getting more training, but we still have a ways to go.
Yeah, well,
I have a question.
Go ahead, Eric. Yeah, please.
Well, it's actually changing the subject somewhat, so I don't want to do that if there are additional thoughts. But I've just been thinking, we were talking a little bit ago, kind of the context of all this, and I would think it would be very instructive, and I would assume Dr. Marshall at least has some idea about this, where, looking at other countries and looking at other cultures, so what are the rates like? In other words, is America, particularly high, or is it in the middle, or is it low? Where is it highest, and what are those contributing factors? I would think we could kind of, if not make a causation relationship, at least kind of a corollary type relationship to see where this is something that occurs most often, and equally importantly, where it occurs least often.
I think it's certainly something that those of us that are in prevention have looked at countries that have higher rates and lower rates and really trying to understand. There are countries that have higher rates than the U.S. and there's ones that have lower. I think where it gets complicated is that, suicide may have different meanings in different cultures, right? Or there may be different things that influence it. For example, laws around access to certain, ways of dying could have very much influence a suicide rate. So, for example, a country like Sri Lanka, their suicide rate was related to pesticides. And once they had more their country regulation of pesticides, it changed their suicide rate. So I give you that example because I do think that, different governments, different legislation can have an impact on it in terms of a person's access to means, but that's only one part of the story. So it's really complicated. I think Western society faces some different things than other cultures around health in general, and suicide is another example of that.
When is there a time that the rate seems to spike compared to other times of the year? I mean, is there a time of the year where you say to yourself, doctor, okay, we're coming into the season that seems to produce the most attempts, or is it pretty much a flat stat across the year?
Yeah, well, interestingly, most people assume that it's around the holidays, which is incorrect, actually. The rates do not typically go up during the holidays. We see more of a rate trend going up in the spring. which is usually counterintuitive for people. Most people assume that, it's the holidays, it's missing families, and that's not the case. Actually, rates are higher in the spring.
In prison, we always used to say they're coming out of hibernation. Watch.
Okay.
It's a terrible thing to say, but it's true because all throughout the winter they're hunkered down. When spring and summer hits, it's going to go up.
That actually makes a lot of sense. I thought for sure, Doctor, you're going to say, nope, holidays, by far, that's the biggest time. But now that you put it in that context, it makes perfect sense that it would be higher in the spring than in the holidays because, of course, winter's over and, like Clarissa said, they're coming out of hibernation, the prisoners, and our mood patterns tend to change. I know I've heard some people blame the lack of sun or whatever. I mean, there's a million theories out there, but one thing that is still not a theory is it's still an epidemic that we still have to get our minds around collectively as a society. And the only time that I see anyone stop and talk about this openly, and it's horrible, is when a celebrity does it. Robin Williams spiked us to talk about on this radio show. We didn't talk about a lot. Chris Cornell, now Chester Bennington. Why does it take these big acts of suicide, these big leaders or entertainers, to make us go, whoa, wait a minute, this could touch us very easily? I honestly think that we should all be a little more mindful of the fact that no one's immune from this. I know my family's been touched by suicide. I left me wondering why. And I guess my question is also the aftermath. What's the aftermath for the families?
I mean, as you might imagine, and if your family has been touched by suicide, first, I'm very sorry to hear about that. But also, then firsthand just how devastating this is when it happens in a family or to someone that we know. And often people are left confused, and wondering, is this something we missed? Should we have seen something? Mm-hmm. And, again, it's very easy to look back. But very hard to look forward and think of suicide as a possibility for someone we love. We do a lot of AFSP to support those who are grieving a loss by suicide. We have several programs and different events that we do to kind of help those families connect to other families and other people who have experienced a loss. Because I think when this happens, you think, no one else, who else does this happen to? But unfortunately, it happens much more than we realize. And most of us will know someone in our lifetime who has been touched by suicide intimately, or have someone close to us die by suicide.
Another great...
I was just going to say, I'm glad you mentioned the support groups because I think it's really important.
Another good question coming from the audience, and do you see more suicide with people with chronic illness? Like i.e. cancer or diabetes, things on that nature, than you would the normal individual without mental issues?
Chronic illness is certainly a risk factor, and particularly things, chronic pain conditions. I think it's not the whole story, of course, but, it is something to pay attention to because often it leads people to a feeling of hopelessness or a hard time seeing things getting better. It may limit their social abilities or their connections to, be out and be with other people. So, it's not the whole story, but it certainly is a risk factor when it comes to suicide.
Yeah. What about, we haven't really touched on kind of the general topic of medication. It cuts both ways. There's a lot of people, and kind of go back to we were talking about earlier about middle-aged men who may feel that medication, and I don't know that this is true, but who may feel that it's some sort of crutch and something to be avoided. I know when my daughter was first expressing depressive thoughts and going through some of the same process, kind of amazing, some of the things you guys are mentioning in terms of signs and whatnot, because, man, she showed them all. She was in bed much more. She was sleeping much more. She clearly had changes in behavior. Her grades went down. And I mean, we knew something was going on, but I guess, you know, the stereotype is we just didn't take it seriously enough. But anyway, even she, as a teenage girl, said, "Oh, I am absolutely not going to take medication. I don't want to get caught up in that. I don't want to become dependent on it." You know, and on and on. So, just generally speaking, as far as what you could tell the listeners in terms of how they should view medication, you know, again, it's a two-edged story. You don't want people to become too dependent on it. On the other hand, you certainly want them to get it if it's going to help them.
I think it's really important to encourage people to at least start the conversation with someone, a mental health provider, to see if medication is something that might help. You know, often people make that decision for themselves without having all of the information about how this might help or in what ways it might help. And, you know, the very nature of depression is that sometimes it's hard for us to think clearly about what might be good for us. That being said, you know, I do think that it's often a combination of things. It's often a combination of counseling and medication, for example, or medication and lifestyle changes and counseling. You know, we don't think about diabetes the same way. If someone needed insulin to control their blood sugar, we wouldn't think of it the same way we think of medication for mental health concerns. It still has some stigma, but that's a lot of the work we do is really trying to break through the stigma around mental health treatment.
And I've noticed...
I just want to make one more note about the medication thing, is that I think, you know, Eric, you were talking about kind of what your daughter had to say and things like that. First off, I have never really seen antidepressants become a dependency issue. That is not typical of taking antidepressants. And second, I usually ask people when they're extremely depressed, well, is it better to stay like this? You know, wouldn't you rather try something that has the potential to change how you feel rather than, you know, go with a fear of the unknown, you know?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
we've seen it. I mean, I've seen it play out. She had this very serious depressive episode. She was, you know, hospitalized for a few days. She began the process in that kind of setting, and I don't think there's even any question anymore. She's doing much, much, much better. The medication is a part of the puzzle. The therapy is part of the puzzle. Yeah, she just told me she needs a refill. So we're going to get that taken care of tomorrow.
And she is the bravest, best girl. Tell her that, because she is.
You are the bravest, best girl, Lily. Yes. So, I mean, this is all in a course of months. I mean, it's not really a long time, but I mean, it's really quite night and day to see the combination of the medication, kind of a change in perspective, certainly, absolutely, the therapy, and I think just sort of a general family and friends awareness too. Also, she has found out, I mean, there's a number of her friends that are taking either anti-anxiety or antidepressants or both. I'm talking about very successful, high-functioning, valedictorian level, you know, teenagers. And so I guess that's just kind of where we are these days. You know, I hope we can get away from the stigma. I have to admit, I had some concerns. You know, gosh, do I want my teenage daughter to be on, you know, whatever? I'm not sure what I thought, to be perceived to be, you know, heavy drugs, and that this would somehow change her ability to function, change her cognitive ability. I don't know what I thought. I was kind of fuzzy on it, but it's been very, very gratifying. I mean, thus far, it's not like there's an end to it, but it's a process. I certainly realize that. But the process thus far has gone about as well as it could, and I'm extremely grateful. And back just to the insurance and the availability, at least where we are in Northeast Ohio, it does seem to be pretty readily available. And there's a combination of insurance and Medicare, I guess. And these things are very, very helpful. And as long as people, I really do encourage everyone to avail themselves of these opportunities. And if you have the slightest thoughts along these lines, or if you are feeling depressed and feel that you cannot pull yourself out of it, or as my daughter said, she felt like she was underwater. Do you feel like you are underwater? Do you feel like you cannot surface? Please do get help. And that we should end the show, not that we're exactly there, but we really should emphasize getting a hold of the various organizations and how people can do that, and providing the phone numbers and whatnot, because if nothing else, we should be that source. And gosh, I feel really good about this show. I really apologize. I was literally driving in the car until about a minute ago. But I'm really glad I didn't miss it and was able to participate, because I just think it's so important. And I've seen it, as I said, in both directions in my life in terms of generationally. And I just realize how absolutely critical it is. And I am only lucky that the signals that I did not pick up on early enough or take seriously did not have the worst possible result. It is pure luck, and I know it. And I say my prayers every night, thankful prayers, that my lack of perception did not have the worst possible result, because it very, very easily could have.
Well, that brings up a great point from our listeners, and Dr. Marshall, they're saying, we've all heard about teen suicide, a lot of stuff out there about that. We've heard about suicide, with other groups of people, but why does it not seem like there is more information out there targeting the biggest group of people committed suicide, and that's the middle-aged male? It seems that they are underserved when it comes to yelling from the rooftops, because everyone heard about, teen prevention. But I have to agree with some of our listeners who are saying, yeah, but where's our prevention? Where's the people screaming for us and fighting for us?
It's a great question, and I think it's something for those of us that work in prevention. It's really one of the areas where we're really starting to focus our work, is trying to figure out ways to reach men in this group who are at risk. And so one of the things we've done at the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention is we have a partnership with the National Shooting Sports Foundation, and we're working with them to get the message out. They are the trade association for firearm retailers and the shooting sports. And that's one place where, it's more predominantly men, although there are also women who are involved in those sports. But, finding, I think, new and innovative ways to reach men is really the charge for those of us in prevention, because we haven't reached them in the way we need to with this information and with helping them, to promote help seeking and look out for one another.
Sure. Very well said. I want to end the show on this note. And first of all, thank you, Doctor, for coming on it. Really enlightening stuff, and thank you so much. Again, the Suicide Prevention Hotline, if you need it, if you feel at all like this and you need help, call this number, 1-800-273-8255. There's also a text line you can be a part of. And get this, they're also on Twitter at 800-273-TALKS. They're also on Twitter. You don't even have to necessarily call. So that being said, thank you so much, everyone, for listening to this show. We love you all. If there's anything we can do to help our audience, we're always there for you as well. But make sure to help each other as well. Doctor, again, thank you so much for coming on. Dr. Cole, of course.
My pleasure.
Quite an honor. All of that. Eric, man, see each other tomorrow night, and take care of each other. See you later. Thank you for listening to this edition of After Hours AM, and please remember to like us on Facebook and also follow us over on Twitter.